Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring you.
Is your mic on, sir?
Yeah, it is. Maybe I'll pull it up further. Hello?
You know, geek friendly, you know how the
Yeah, there we
sports
go.
broadcasters are.
Yeah, we'll make like football. Okay. Members of the committee, I bring you Senate Joint Resolution 2. And I was looking at a variety. I went over to our good folks over in Revenue in that department, and we're going over everything that had been tried back in when things were escalating in 06, 07, 08. A lot of failed attempts. A lot of the problems back then were the high property taxes were pretty much isolated to one or two areas at that time. Big book. I collected a whole book of the property tax bills that had been attempted. Settled in on this one, another one involving caps. Then I heard not to reference other legislation, but something moved through the process that put that through. And I thought, well, maybe that's the angle to go. So I decided to hold back on that, but I appreciate the good chairman jumping up and saying, no, maybe this is the solution. And the more I study it, it is, because I was visiting with our assessors and say, well, if you cap it, you cap the property tax situation, then you end up with situations where multi-million properties are bought for millions of dollars and just a small amount of property taxes paid. That's not the direction we go, but what we really want to do is protect those who are just stunned by all this. Folks all across the state were finding situations where folks, good neighbors moving in, but they're paying large amounts for tracts of land, prime amounts. They're building huge homes on them. And here's these folks across Wyoming just living a basic normal life, and all of a sudden they get their tax bill because of the assessment and because of the way we have it in law. They're being stunned with, I had one letter that said, that's 140% increase. Is that possible? And I said, it is. We've got to find a solution. And I'm starting to hear from the center of the state, the western side of the state, the northwest side of the state, that people are starting to feel the shock as they open up the envelope or click open their assessor's bill. So I bring you Senate Joint Resolution. Constitutional amendment exempts 50% of the first $200,000 in fair market value. Homeowner or spouse, the homeowner, they have to be 65 years or older. Residential property has been the primary residence for them individually for at least 10 years under this resolution. We want to consider the discount. We allow the legislature by law to increase or decrease the amount of fair market value which is exempted from taxation. Legislature can set it at less or more than 200,000. It requires the legislature to reimburse local governments for lost property tax revenue as a result of this senior citizen exemption that I'm bringing you today in Senate Joint Resolution 2. But what you need to note, there's a fiscal impact. It doesn't come without some challenges along the way. Eligible residents would receive a maximum exemption of $637. The median home value in this state right now, based on the figures we do have this time, $235,200. Assume that 60% of the qualifying properties, about $25,955, would receive the full $637 exemption. 25% of the qualifying properties would receive 75% of the full exemption. 15% qualifying properties would receive 25% of the full exemption, resulting in a total estimated exemption of approximately $22.73 million. One of the problems, folks, is we need some more accurate figures who are out there 65 years and older and who have a home. And that could come because this has to have some follow-up legislation to kind of backfill it. But that would help as we studied that, we'd have better estimates. What we have to be careful is the state's going to lose some revenue on this, but we're going to find a way to help our senior citizens. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I don't pretend to be an expert on property taxes. What I do know is we've got a problem. We've got a problem for those on fixed incomes, senior citizens, and it's not, I don't see it being corrected. As I spoke about something related to housing and the high cost of housing earlier this week, I don't see any of it going away, Mr. Chairman. It's here. What we have to do is find a way to help those who just, when you're 65, 75, 85, you're not going to go out and find another job, start over. You've given your commitment to living here in Wyoming and helping the state and being a part of these communities. Let's find a way to help these folks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just a couple questions. And I'm also glad that you brought this. I think this is something that we're hearing all over the state from our seniors, of some of the issues. On page 2, where it talks about the primary residence of the homeowner, do you think there's going to be any issue there with trying to determine, or do you think maybe, I guess, people will try to game the system, those that maybe have a second home in certain counties to try to get that as their primary, to, use that as a tax haven? I don't know. I'm just trying to think outside the box a little bit on that.
And
Senator.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And first of all, your first notation had a lot of help in bringing this in a very unique way on the Senate floor, and I do appreciate that help.
Mhm.
But I've thought about that, and we'd have to put the sideboards in place that we're not having people parachute into Wyoming, pick up these homes and say they're mine just because I've lived here X amount of years. In our area, we've had some the 10 years plus, but mostly the change has come, Senator Schuler, most recently, and Mr. Chairman, most recently, it's wow, just since the last 2 years, I am stunned at what's happening on specifically on the west side of the state, where you're from, good Senator, and all the way up through there. But now we're starting to hear about places, central part of the state and northwest part of the state. It would need the rules and regs in place to make sure that people don't game the system.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else? Follow up? Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate on page 4, you mentioned again about the fact that we would have to reimburse those local governments for the lost revenue. Is there any way to, I doubt that you can answer this, but is there any way to predict what that might be? And maybe the Department of Revenue might have a better answer. I just kind of wondered if we had any clue as to how many.
Well,
folks
Mr.
Go ahead.
Chairman,
Yeah.
Senator, the overall loss to the state, and here's the reality check, 22.73 million in revenue per year. If this constitutional amendment was adopted, we have to step out there in the next follow-up bill to make sure that they're backfilled, folks are backfilled and taken care of. It's not an easy solution. It does help our senior citizens, but we got to make sure our locals are taken care of too.
More? Anybody else? Thank you, Senator. Stand by. We'll hear from other folks. Who else would like to testify on this bill? Mr. Winnie?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I support the bill. Having said that, I'd also remark that my retirement income is high enough where I don't think I would ever be a beneficiary of the results of the bill. I'd like to bring some things to your attention. President Dockstader spoke briefly about those on fixed incomes, and I'd like to remark that most of your state retirees do not get a cost of living adjustment. In order to put that in context, I retired from active duty in 2002. And given the sum of the usually small cost of living adjustments for federal pensions, my pension from my active duty 30 years Navy time has doubled since 2002. And your state retirees don't get that kind of benefit. So that's one thing to put it in context. Another thing is I've gone around and knocked on doors and talked to people, campaigning and so on. It is my impression that you should take a step back and look at elder care costs versus what it costs if you give this kind of money up and let them stay in their home. I believe you'll find staying in their home will be less expensive. Then the third thing I'd mention is you probably at some point, as you probably take a look at income, are going to find people asking for certain categories of income to be excludable. For instance, a disabled veteran gets a stipend from the Department of Veterans Affairs. and it is not taxable. It doesn't show up on a W-2 or anything else. Of course, Social Security, 15% of that is not taxable. And again, doesn't show up on documents like that. Now, my military pension is fully taxable. I pay taxes on it. It would show up. But anyway, I put those things out as food for thought for you, subject to your questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Questions for Mr. Winnie? Senator Pappas.
I thought I just heard you say that you wouldn't qualify because of your salary or your pension amount. I don't think this is tied at all.
Well,
Pension
Mr.
amount.
Winnie. through the chair.
Did I understand you wrong?
Mr. Chairman, I have seen things like this end up taking into account one's income as a threshold for whether you qualify for it. So I just tossed that thought out, Mr. Chairman. Senator Pappas.
Senator Pappas.
To my knowledge, there's two qualifications. You owned a house for 10 years and you're over 65. I think those are the only 2 points in this bill. Just wanted to clarify that.
I think that's correct.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I understand.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Winnie? Any other questions? We might add an income qualification. We'll see. Possible. Okay, thank you, Mr. Winnie. Anybody else like to testify? Mr. Laycox, welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom Laycock with AARP Wyoming, and apparently we have Mr. Winnie's salary we got to pay for that little bump on home and community-based services there. So we're obviously in support of the bill. We want to thank you, President Dockstader, for his sensitivity to the issue over the interim. We really heard from our members about 2 issues, and property tax was actually a big one of them. A couple of weeks ago, we had the opportunity to talk with Director Henson specifically about what she was seeing in terms of values, home values in the state of Wyoming, and she suggested about 50 to 20% increase year over year in the last year, which really does impact the property taxes. Now, we also understand the question you guys have in front of you about revenue, understanding that, nationwide, it's about 1/3 of all revenue comes from property taxes. So we appreciate what you guys have ahead of you. Chairman Case mentioned it a little bit ago in terms of any sorts of income guidelines, and we certainly appreciate that you'd have to consider that as well. Just ask that relief be prioritized to those with the least ability to pay the tax. So if the committee doesn't feel this is the vehicle for property tax relief, there are other options such as the property tax refund program, which is not currently funded. But that said, we stand in support. Happy to answer any questions, and many thanks to the committee for taking this on.
Thank you very much. Questions for the gentleman? Thank you very much. Who else would like to testify? Yes, sir. While you're getting situated, we might look under the income qualifications for I'm thinking the other tax rebate that's in the law, the one it's not funded right now. And I believe it's like 3/4 of the median income or something like that. But yes, sir, go back to you. Welcome. Thank you, sir. Would you say your name again? Davis. Assessor Davis, thank you very much for testifying. Questions for the assessor? Any questions? Do you recall the income guidelines for the property tax rebate program? Yeah. We'll find it out. We're just looking. Thank you very much. And thanks to all the assessors. You guys did great work this session, by the way. Yeah. You did great. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to testify? Ms. Arnold, were you going to weigh in? If you can't, you don't have to weigh in, but I said Ms. Arnold and I'm Ms. Henson. I keep flowing back to the old years. I did a call of the House the other day in the Senate and the chief clerk going, how long were you in the House? Just 6 years, and you've been here 24 years and you still called it a call of the House? And it's still Ms. Arnold, and I apologize. Ms. Henson.
Mr. Chairman, just to provide some clarity on the requirements of the statewide
Tax rebate.
tax refund program. So the current statute requires 3/4 of the median gross household income for the county. And I do apologize. We reach out to economic analysis to crunch those numbers, and I have not received those yet. But there is that income threshold. And then there's also a maximum on that refund program of 1/2 of the median property tax bill is refundable. And I do have those numbers. But again, that is addressed by this joint resolution as far as the amount of value that would be exempt. I would, Mr. Chairman, like to speak to the information that we don't have that to give us real good numbers. First of all, we don't have any mechanism of knowing the age of property owners within our state. We can, use census numbers, those types of things, but unfortunately, we don't know how many of those seniors actually own their home. And so those are just pieces that we don't have. I think given a little bit more research, and it sounds like President Dockstader has done some of that, but definitely, perhaps some mechanisms, if there was a dollar amount that the legislature was looking at, we're interested in spending X amount of dollars towards a program, possibly this legislation could be worded such that it could be calculated as a percentage of that total dollar amount, something where each year, you could allocate that. And so, that's a possibility. But definitely, as stated previously, once this legislation passed, went to the voters, we know that follow-up legislation would really get down into how this would be implemented, administered. If, it's at that point that I would think that the Department of Revenue possibly would have the ability to promulgate rules very similar to the rules that we've put in place for the property tax refund program. But certainly we stand ready to assist the legislature.
Committee, any questions for Ms. Henson? Ms. Henson, help me think through the idea that in that other program, it's based on each county's median income, 3/4, I think it's roughly something like that. Is that appropriate in this sense? I mean, the people that are most harmed are probably people that have owned their home in some of the fastest growing counties. And they may be most harmed, but at the same time, the bar of the median income is farther away for them. So I'm wondering if maybe a statewide median income would be more appropriate than a county by county median income. I'm just trying to think of fairness here.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, and definitely that's a policy statement. I will tell you a statewide median income is also skewed by our one county that has the highest per capita income. So it is challenging to look at it in that manner. But this serves to be something I equate very similar to why we as a society fund education the way we do. We believe it's important. We put it as a priority, and we all pay even though we have or haven't got children in school. This is definitely one of those. It's a policy statement, a society statement that this legislative body would make, stating that we want to provide property tax relief to our seniors. And so perhaps your statement is spot on. Maybe it isn't income related at that point.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Ms. Henson.
Thank you.
Who else would like to testify on this bill? Anybody else want to testify on the bill? Not seeing any takers, so committee, you've heard the testimony. What's your pleasure? I heard almost everybody saying that. I think I heard Baldwin first. We'll give, and so let's discuss the bill. Are there any proposed amendments? I really think we should explore the income issue. You know, not everybody that's a senior is in the same situation. So anyway, Senator Pappas?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I too was about to mention that. I don't know that we have an instrument ready for us to do that now, but we could put that in the subsequent amendment on the floor. But you know, I guess the only question, I do agree with this. The only question is actually making this a change in our constitution, because then it'll be there forever, right? There's and I will support it, but whether we really want to change the constitution to make this virtually permanent is a question I had in my mind. So just sharing my thoughts with everyone.
Anybody else? Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would be really open to taking a look at the income issue, because I think that's important. And even though this, you know, could obviously, if it passes, I think it will affect our revenue a bit. But I think what we do for our citizens is most important, especially our seniors. As someone mentioned earlier, you know, it's not like they can go out and get a job when they're 65, 70. Well, they can, but I mean, most wouldn't. So I think the thing I feel most comfortable with is that we're putting it to the voters, and, you know, they can decide. And I think the voters in Wyoming, with just seeing what's happening the last few years, I think that they would be very amenable to this. And anytime you let them help you make the decision, I feel very comfortable with it being a part of the Constitution. Thank you.
And anybody else? Senator Pappas, just to answer your question about the Constitution, I feel that this is the place we should make these changes rather than, you know, there's individual bills that propose just to cap property tax without changing the Constitution. And I don't think that our Constitution permits that. I mean, they kind of involve a tortuous definition of either market value or fair market value, or kind of imply that the legislature has more power than we actually have in that situation. And so to me, I support changing the Constitution to give property tax relief. I'm not sure that, you know, if I had to say, I don't necessarily agree that it should be seniors only, but that's what we got in front of us. And I think it's a good bill. It's an important bill. And I hope we can get it in good shape. Anybody else? Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I had a quick question or clarification. Well, how big would the effect be on the county governments, do you think, if we were to remove the reimbursement aspect of it? Because if we have that reimbursement, then this legislature has a tendency to come up with new taxes or fees or some way to make up for it. The local governments would probably be doing the same thing. And so I'm just trying to make it to where if we're helping one group of people, that everyone else isn't going to be affected by it in a negative way. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Discussion? Senator Dockstader, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. That's when and Mr. Chairman and Senator James said, there's the reality check. 22.73 million per year. This was approved, the spread between all funds and entities that receive property taxes, your locals, school foundation, K through 12, local resources, local governments. That's the reality check. I guess we could put together something that showed county by county, but that's where we're at. It would have an effect, but at the same time, this whole situation that we have going on out there is just, I promise you, Senator, you're going to be hearing from your constituency on this in the next 2 years. It's a tough one. Go ahead.
Certainly, we have a follow-up.
I just want to be clear, I'm in support of the bill as it is. I was just asking what would the effect be and that type of thing. So don't get me wrong. I'm definitely in support of it. So,
Mr.
yeah,
Chairman?
I just don't like the actual reimbursement aspect of it because I know we have a tendency to, when there's a loss somewhere, we're not very imaginative. And so we just think of taxes or fee increases. And that'll penalize the same people that we're trying to help in tax or fees. So they may get it on the front end, but the government will get them in the back end.
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chairman,
Senator.
there's a reality check, Mr. Chairman, Senator James. It's, we could get that county by county as we have to come around and do a follow-up bill for backfill and all of that. I can't say how these entities will come back and approach us, but I'm going to lean into finding the solution on the taxes at this point.
Senator Pappas.
Since this is actually changing our constitution, I feel it's a state obligation anyhow. So rather than shoving it down onto the counties and asking them to pick up the bill, I really, since we're changing the constitution, it's a statewide issue. I think it's a state obligation. So I'm comfortable the way it is.
Okay. One thing that strikes me is it's a bit of a distributional issue if you sort of make it on the counties. Some counties get a proportionally large amount of their property tax from residential property. So they would likely be, and they may have proportionally more senior citizens, so they could be impacted more than others that get a lot more minerals and less makeup from the property tax. It's kind of there's a distributional aspect, but that's my 2 cents. Anybody else? Would we explore the income qualification? Would anybody like to offer an amendment in that area? Senator Baldwin.
I'd like to offer an amendment. I believe on page 2, we can do it. On line 16, if after date, we remove that period and just simply add in the homeowner's family income is less than 50% of the median household income in Wyoming, rather than just the county, but do it the entire state.
And then I think as a conforming part of that, you would also strike the and
On line 13,
on line
after
13.
the comma.
Go ahead, Senator Baldwin.
You want me to read that again?
Pretend you're a pharmacist.
I can barely read this. Doctor. On line 13, just to make it conform, after assessment date, we did strike the and. So it's assessment date, the homeowner is owned. And then on line 16, after date and after the period, we'd insert and the homeowner's family income is less than 50% of the median household income in Wyoming.
Discussion on amendment. I would look at that as a starting point. We can go explore and see if that fits correctly, but it gives us an entry into an income qualification on this bill.
Mr. Chairman, I would be open to that as a starting point, not opposed. I think, Mr. Chairman, as we move forward, we're going to have that in place to gain the full support of the Senate.
I think we will too, and it might need a conforming amendment in the ballot language. Let's just hold off on that for now, but any further discussion on the proposed amendment? If you guys don't have it, I'll get it for you, I promise. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I show 1 no, rest in support. Anything else on the bill? Anything else on the bill? But if we call roll on the bill?
Roll call Senate Joint 2 amended. Senator Baldwin.
Aye.
Senator James. Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Senator Schuler.
Aye.
Chairman Case.
Aye. Nice job, Senator Doug Stater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee. I would like to thank the chairman for helping the sponsor to see what he couldn't see. Thank you. Let's press forward and find a solution.
Let's do it. All right. Mr. Meyer, you're up next. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 76. It's financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. And of course, this is my bill, so I'd like to yield the chair. Senator Baldwin, would you take this chair on this bill?
I would be honored, sir.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Meyer. Welcome to the second friendliest committee in the Senate. The first is my committee. Just joking, of course. Go ahead, Mr. Meyer, introduce yourself and please present the bill.
Chairman-elect, acting, whatever, Baldwin,
The guy to
members
his
of the
right.
committee. Scott Meyer with the Wyoming Bankers Association. We enlisted some help in bringing this bill, and I can walk through, but it just generally right now, it just, as an overview, it's a bill that helps financial institutions protect against our vulnerable adults. And the vulnerable adults, it really can comprise of a lot of different things. It could be certainly age, but it could be comprised of somebody that is much younger that may have a stroke or have other frailties that might be in there that would put somebody else maybe in their shoes and have them working on their behalf and maybe take advantages of certain situations. And what I've seen through all my years of representing financial institutions in Wyoming over the last 25 years, you look at it and there's just not a week that goes by that we didn't have somebody that had a power of attorney of some sort that was able to use that money, probably not so much for the benefit of the ward or the person that is there, but also for the, for their own purposes, just to enrich their own lives. You could see a lot of different things that come up that maybe there is a situation where it may be a borderline call. You can say, here's what it is, and I'm not sure. This will give the financial institutions a chance to investigate, put the brakes on things. Let's see what it is. Maybe grandma really does need an F-350, but probably not, especially when she's 94. But you look at it and you find those situations, but there might be something where that is borderline. And we've had banks even as much as a couple of weeks ago where they have reached out to a family member, and this bill allows them to do that, to check up on something, do have a law enforcement officer do wellness check, what have you, and come to find out everything was as it was supposed to be. Maybe the institution had a little bit of egg on their face, but it wouldn't be near as much as if the wrongdoing had occurred and then we'd lost that money. So this bill, and I'm happy to walk through it with you, that's just the general idea. When I'm looking at it, if you start on page 2, that has definitions. This refers to the Department of Family Services. So this is where financial institutions, if they suspect a problem and some wrongdoing, they can contact Department of Family Services, which is the appropriate area to look at and make sure that they are these vulnerable adults are looked after. There's a definition of exploitation. What is being exploited here? And that's the power, the influence that a person may have over a vulnerable adult. Financial exploitation. This is where money gets moved and and transactions occur. It's the withholding of what have you of money that's on one side or taking their money on the other hands.
I'm going to hit the pause button here really quick.
Yes.
That is, the Senate is going back in 17 minutes.
Okay.
So
Then we'll move very
Not to
quickly.
cut you short, but if we can just.
No,
kind of
that's very
expedite
good.
it.
The one area that I wanted to point out to is on page 4, 1310, 402. That is what is the meat of this, is where the employee notices something in that financial institution and they have an obligation to turn that over, to make some comment to their superiors. And then there is a time period when the financial institution has to report that. Down below on page 5, 3510-103 talks about that's the reporting that's also done with law enforcement. So if you do that under this new bill, you don't have to reduplicate that with law enforcement. It just gives them that added. There is also provision that's in that's the bottom of page 6, starting on page 7, under 1310-403, that financial institutions can notify a third person. So if somebody brings in and has this account set up, or they have a power of attorney, they can do it to check with a third person. They don't have, they can do what they do call a wellness check or whatever to make sure that everything is what it's supposed to be. The only area that I have a little bit of concern with that I want to just let you know is under 1310-404, temporary hold on the transactions. And if you look at paragraph A, Romanet 1, it reads, may place a hold on any transaction that involves an account of a vulnerable adult if the financial institution, and it goes on. Having talked with a lot of my members, there is a proposed amendment that they would like to have in there, and it would read, may place a hold on any transaction that involves an account of a vulnerable adult, and then add, or that contains the vulnerable adult's assets or property if the financial institution. And the reason for that is that they're telling me now is that they see situations where somebody who has a power of attorney goes in there and takes the money and moves it into their own account. Now I can't stop it because it's already happened. This is an opportunity for all financial institutions, which includes broker dealers and everybody else that deals with financial matters for adults, vulnerable adults, to stop that and say, we're going to put a hold on that account too until law enforcement or DFS takes a look at this.
Can you just word that one more time for me so I make sure I've got it down right?
Yes. With the amendment, it would read, may place a hold on any transaction that involves an account of a vulnerable adult. And then I added, or that contains the vulnerable adult's assets or property.
Very good. Proceed.
Other than that, there is I think the kicker for most of the financial institutions is on page 9. It's 3510-405, and it's immunity. And this gives the financial institutions immunity. We're not going to have anybody with a power of attorney come sue them for making sure that they're looking out for our vulnerable adults.
Very good. Committee, questions for Mr. Meyer? Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just curious, if there is a hold placed on the account or anything like that, who's responsible for any incurring late fees or penalties for late payments that may occur for not being able to make a mortgage or credit card payment or whatever? Who's responsible for those payments?
Mr. Chairman, Senator James, I will tell you that because of the statute that there is immunity in there will not be any penalties on that. Now, if there's a penalty from a credit card company or what have you, the information on this would let them know that they're not allowed to do that.
Thank you. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. The question I had was on the top of page 7. And you mentioned on the third party, it would probably be somebody with power of attorney or maybe an executor of a will. If that person had no one like that, but had a family member, could they be considered the third party, or does it have, where could that go, I guess?
Mr. Meyer.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Senator Schuler, I will tell you that that person would be designated either in advance, or if not, then I think that the final institution could reach out to anybody else, whether it might be a clergy person or somebody that they could look at for that third person. But it had to be reasonably associated with that, somebody that actually would know.
Very good. Further questions, committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Pappas.
just wanted to clarify on that point that we talked about the holding on the account. That's only that one transaction, right? That's in question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, yes, regarding that transaction.
Is that
If they've locked up the account for everything, it might be something different.
Yeah.
But this is because we suspect a transaction occurring. So if you had routine monthly payments, that would not be affected.
okay? Good.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Further questions? Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman Case. I can almost say that. Chairman Case, do you have anything to add to the presentation of the bill?
No, I think that covers it. Hopefully you got time for some public testimony.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Meyer. Stand by. Public testimony. Anyone wish to testify to the bill? Jump right up, sir. Introduce yourself again and share your thoughts with us.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I have I support the bill. I think it's very, very appropriate. I had occasion to observe my father-in-law and mother-in-law circa 2004, 2005 pass away. and the inner workings and hidden mechanisms of the three daughters involved. Fortunately, I was able to assist my wife by putting in place a few checks and balances that made it all come out pretty well. But it could have gone south. More recently, my son, who lives down in Denver, his wife passed away about 3 years ago, and then his father-in-law passed away about a year ago intestate. And the mother-in-law had a brain problem about 3 years ago and would have been a prime target for exactly what is being discussed here. Fortunately, my son has been handling things along with a good financial advisor, and things are going as well as they should. She's now in a elder care facility, but she would have been prime. Subject to your questions. Thank you very much.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Winnie? Thank you. Anyone else wish to testify? A new face to the table. Jump on up.
Get up closer so we can run fast.
Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dave Pickard, representing Mountain West Credit Union Association. I worked with Mr. Meyer on this piece of legislation. We're in support of it in concept. I will point out just one issue that we see, and it's probably not something we can fix here today, and that is financial institutions as defined in the statute that's referenced in the bill, say state chartered credit unions instead of federally chartered credit unions. If this bill were to be adopted, it just codifies basically the standard practices that your federally chartered credit unions undertake in the state of Wyoming. So there is no real issue with going forward. We understand with the bill, if it's adopted, the intent, and it's certainly something that my colleagues over at the Banking Association recognizes a need for them, and we stand by that. That I'll answer any questions.
Questions to Mr. Pickard? Something no. Anyone else wish to testify? Jump on up. If there's anybody else who wants to testify, get up close or come claim one of the seats if you'd like. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Schilling, and I'm the Senior Administrator with the Department of Family Services. I just wanted to provide a brief statement. We have a very committed and dedicated group of APS workers ready to support implementation of this as it moves forward. No concerns at all. We have some conforming policy changes to make internally and have some plans to bolster training if this is something that continues to move forward. But otherwise, we are prepared to support the will of the body.
Very good. Questions for Ms. Schilling? Thank you very much. Mr. Laycock.
Tom Laycock, AARP Wyoming. We stand in support of the bill as well. Unfortunately, a lot of our members and people the age of our members tend to get scammed and are the targets of fraud quite a bit. We appreciate the fact this bill actually offers some education on how to report, when to report, and how to investigate as well. So with that said, we're in support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Laycock. Questions? Nope. Looks like we have one final testimony. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremiah Bishop. I am a Deputy Commissioner with the Division of Banking. That's part of the Department of Audit. Our office supervises and regulates financial institutions chartered in Wyoming, and we also administer Title 13, which this bill is a part of. We have no objections to this bill or the amendment that was brought up today, but I did want to make myself available for any questions that any of you may have.
Questions, committee. Go ahead, Senator Case.
First off, the gentleman looks like a banker, so he's in the right job. Going back to Mr. Pickard's question about the federally chartered credit unions, do you think it's possible to alter the definition on line 17 through 19 on page 3? And I'm thinking something like this: financial institution means as defined by WS 13-1401, A Romanet 2, but for the purpose of this article shall also include broker dealers. And how about federally chartered financial institutions or something like that? I think that we could do that.
Okay, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so that Wyoming statute 13-141A, that definition refers to, I have this pulled up, so let me read it real quick, if
Perfect.
you don't mind.
He's a smart guy.
Financial institutions means any bank, savings and loan association, trust company, or credit union having a place of business in Wyoming, whether chartered or organized under the laws of Wyoming or the laws of the United States. So I think that statute, it doesn't actually refer to state chartered credit unions
Okay.
specifically.
I'll pull that all back.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir.
Thank
Good
you very
work.
much. Appreciate it. Thank you. everyone.
Smartphone and smart man. We like that.
Yeah.
Any further questions, committee? Anyone else have a testimony? If not, we will close public testimony. Committee, do you have a desire here?
Do pass, and I would move the amendment.
Oh,
Well,
yeah. there's-
I don't know if there's.
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask about online. Is there anyone else with a hand raised online? Nope, there's not. Okay, then I take back for regarding that. Okay, move bill. Moved by Senator Pappas. Okay,
The amendment would be to add on page 7, line 13, after the word adult, or that contains the vulnerable adult's assets or property, period. Or it's not period, it continues with the rest of the sentence.
any questions or comments, committee? You've heard the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. That amendment passes. Any further amendments, committee?
Question on the bill.
Question being called. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Senate File 76 amended. Senator Baldwin.
Aye.
Senator James. Senator Pappas. Senator Schuler.
Aye.
Chairman Case.
Aye. Thank you, Senator Baldwin. Thank you, everybody. Get back to work. We'll see if we got more work on Thursday. We'll find out. We don't know yet. I'm hoping we can get to Senate File 97 re-referred over here.
Thursday is the last day. to come out.
Thursday, last